This next part of our program is something called a community moment. This is where one of our community members comes up and gives a talk about something that is important to them. It can be light, it can be serious, but it gives everybody a chance to see and meet a member of our community and to hear their thoughts. Today's talk is on the Kennedy Assassination, and it will be given by C.B. Forbess. I got that right? Where? You got it. There you are. All right.
Otherwise, the coffee guy, right? Okay. Excuse me while I get this thing going here. This is challenging for me. I've already forgotten. Here we go. Okay. I do go by CB. If anybody's that curious, my name is Charles Burton, and there's a long story to that. But the reason I want to talk about this today, today is Veterans Day. Are there any veterans here who would like to join me in standing? Would you like to stand, Gary? Thank you. Thank you. And the moment that I'm talking about happened on November 22nd, 1963. At that time, I had quit college. I'd been in the Army about a year and a half. I had been assigned to a spy station on the Black Sea of Turkey where we did electronic surveillance on Russian missile testing. I was between posts. I'd been reassigned to North Carolina due to an event that I don't want to get into, but basically I'd lost my security clearance. I was not in a good state of mind. And I was spending a few days in Washington, D.C., where I'd done advanced training and was at that time my favorite city. Back then, I don't think the same thing today, but back then, perhaps it was just me, but you could feel the power. The place palpitated with power. And these were the years. I grew up in the 1950s. To adulthood or young adulthood. And these were the years of the Eisenhower administration when the great myth of America being heroes was in full bloom. We were Camelot. We were the shining city on the hill, and I was raised to believe that. I was proud to serve my country, and I was proud to be in the military. This, of course, were before the years of the civil rights strife, before the sexual revolution, before the Vietnam War, and the corruption of Richard Nixon. Pardon me, I hope nobody's offended about that, but I was alive then. And during these times, we were the good guys. We were taught to believe that we were the good guys. Even though we had the Cold War going on and there was always a nuclear threat from Russia, we were the heroes. So on this day, I happened to be in Washington, D.C., and I was staying at an old YMCA that's gone, it's no longer there, but it was about a block and a half from the White House. And I had previously put my traveling uniform, you had to travel in your dress uniform, I put it in the cleaners and had gone to the cleaners behind the Y to pick it up. I was standing at the counter. I will never forget this moment. I was third in line. The man who was first had been given his clothes. He had paid for his clothes. He was exiting the room or the building, the small. It was a small space. He was exiting the business when a scream, a loud scream that I won't emulate. There's a gate. She ran through the gate, and as she went up the stairs, this was kind of a sub-basement, she screamed, "They shot him! They shot him!" We were stunned. The lady at the counter said, "There's a radio in the back. I'll be right back." She ran back. She was gone maybe a minute. And she came back and they said, "The president's been shot in Dallas." She asked me to put the close sign over the door. She said, "I'm closing the shop. Give me your tickets." And we were out of there in just a minute. I walked with my clothes back around the block to the entrance of the Y. And as I walked in the lobby, Walter Cronkite had just been handed a piece of paper where he said that the president had been shot in Dallas and was taken to Parkland Hospital. I, like everyone else, was absolutely stunned. Remember, this was Camelot. Things don't happen like this in America. We're not a banana republic. We're the good guys. Nobody shoots our leaders. So I went up to my room. I put my clothes away. I was there for a few minutes. I came back down to hear Walt Cronkite take off his glasses. This is more emotional, I thought, and announce that President Kennedy had been killed in Dallas. And my whole feelings changed. I went absolutely cold. I couldn't believe it. Like I say, people were stunned, people were speechless. I left the Y, I walked about a block and a half to the White House, and I can still see it. For those of you who've been in D.C., there's a long fence in front of the White House, and there's a guard gate. I walked up on the end of the guard gate. I saw two men coming out of the White House. One of them was crying, weeping uncontrollably. The second man was holding him up. They got to the guard gate, and a Marine went out and hailed a taxi. The men got in the taxi, and they left. I didn't know who they were, but I'll never forget that. Then I looked down the fence of the White House, and people were gathering at the fence. Some people were on their knees and reaching through the fence and wailing. People were actually wailing because the president was dead. New York Avenue runs into Pennsylvania at that point, and I saw people running down the sidewalk of New York Avenue to get to Pennsylvania. It was a horrible day, an indescribable day, and like I say, my own feelings were, I was shattered. I felt absolutely shattered, as though I had been shot. I don't remember much about the next couple of days. I know that evening I gathered at Lafayette Square across the street from the White House. There may have been several hundred, 1,000 people. I have no idea. The place was packed. A few people had transistor radios. And the question on everybody's mind by then is, where's Jackie? And the children. Who's going to tell the children that their father was dead? And it was a big concern. You were thinking about what you could think about. And that seemed to be the main topic of the conversation. And I stayed there until the helicopter arrived. I can still see it landing behind the White House. And everybody knew Jackie's home. The kids are okay. So I stayed for a couple more days. Now I'm supposed to start flipping this. Okay. There were headlines all over the world. For anyone who's never seen them, there were 1,000 I could have picked. And I stayed for a couple of days, and there was a cortege. He laid in state in the White House the next day. Then there was the following day, there was a cortege to Capitol, where he was to lie in state for another day before the funeral. This is a photograph of the cortege. You can see the horses. You can see the caisson, his casket. Most people know, they've seen this in movies or photos. His casket was on a wagon, a caisson, and behind that was a black horse with the stirrups turned and the boots facing the wrong way in the stirrups. I was standing on this corner. If you see the building with the columns, I was in that crowd to the left of it, somewhere. I can only emphasize the silence. There were a few sobs, but it was silent. I can still imagine the horse hoofbeats in my imagination. I think somewhere there was a drum, but it was the grimmest day that I have ever experienced. And this was the day that all these beliefs I had in this country, that we were heroes, that we were a shining city. I was raised with this. Shattered. And I knew that we were a vulnerable place and that we were a government of men who could die and who were imperfect. And I've never been the same since in terms of how I regard this country. That's it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, CB, for that very moving presentation.